welcome back, and I hope everybody's doing well. It's a great start to a great week, and I hope everybody's going to have a positive one. You know, we've been doing this for quite some time now over a year, on questions and viewpoints, answers and viewpoints, and I love the questions. I love the interaction. I love people sending me emails and sending me texts and so on and so forth, and asking me different questions and saying, you know, what's this? What is this kick? What is that? How can I say? Move? Where did this come from? Who is this professor? What do you think about this? Those opinions are very enriching to me, because that's how one grows, you know. And Savate will always be an art that continues to grow. You know, dance through Savate of what we teach goes there, and a lot of people say, what is that? You know, well, Savate danseru it encompasses all the disciplines of the French martial arts, and our sports are both Lacan and Savate bouts français, so we don't deviate from any. But leaving that aside, the following question is very well, and it's very well asked, and it's one that people need to know what and who this person was and what he meant to bouts français. And the question is, who was Maitre Charles Charlemont? Who was he? You know, and let me put it to you this way. There's the French martial arts has a very enriched history, has a lot of colorful characters, has a lot of folkloric characters as well throughout its history, okay? From the beginning in the 1800s to the present, there's a lot of great professors. There's professors that have changed the art. There's professors that have modified, changed with the times, the sports, the other disciplines have taught them, and so on and so forth. But now we're talking about a particular professor, Maitre Charles Charlemont. Listen to the title, Maitre. People need to understand that a Maitre is a title given to a professor by the community of saboteurs. Okay? It's not a federal grade. It's one that is given over time of what he's given. It's out of respect. You know, in my time frame, I have met Maitre Selvin Selveni, Maitre Roger Lafont, of course, my professor, Maitre Robert Paturel, and there's others out there, you know, that have gotten that honorary title, as per se, okay? And when we look at that and we look at everything else, you know, we have to hold that responsible for that, because it was the community of Savate that honors that title to that person. Professorships, a professorate is learned, you're studied, it's apprenticed, and you take a test. But a Maitre was not. So let's get back to the question. Who was Maitre Charles Charlemont? Charles Charlemont was the son of Joseph Charlemont. Okay, during the latter part of the 18th century Victorian age, Joseph Charlemont was the one that codified bouts français, and his students continued that same movement. His son Charles was very, very, elaborate individual, was a very athletic individual, was an individual, was a bit of a nobleman as well as a ruffian. He was a person that would fight at a notice, is a person that talked to everybody from the lowest in the totem pole to the highest degree in their level. He was a very well respected man. During his time during the 1890s, remember 1890s, there were two particular bouts that kind of brought bouts français into that. And he was a teacher of bouts français, not Savate. I'm going to have a lot of people arguing, well, Savate this means this, Savate boxe française means that, it's the same thing. Savate's for the street, boxe française is the ring. Wrong. There were two distinct styles at that time frame. There were two distinct styles until the merger and the production of a new sport, which is Savate boxe française, and that was until 1978. In 1830s, boxe française was developed by Charles Lacour, and it kind of went parallel to Savate going down the timeline. Well, so Charles Charlemont was a boxe française practitioner. He was a boxe française teacher, and not only did he teach lutte parisienne, he taught Cannes, and he taught boxe française, correct? He has a lot of students that continued his teaching. Count Baruzzi, a person that I knew very well, told me a lot of stories about his teacher, Charles Charlemont. He told me a lot of stories about the way he was, the way he talked, the way he taught, and he was a person that asked for a lot of precision and relaxation. He also used to tell me that he was a very strong man, that he had natural strength. He goes, most of the professors at that time were very strong individuals, and you can kind of see that, from going in, playing into that. So did the line of Charles Charlemont live until today? Yes, it did. It went from, let's just put it to Count Baruzzi. Count Baruzzi, of course, taught Bernard Plazet, his father, the Plazets, taught a lot of other individuals. Marcel Lassault was a student of his. So my teacher, my professor, Jean-Paul Viviani, was a student of Marcel Lassault, and so many others, because you had to go through Marcel Lassault to become a professor of boxe française back in the 1970s. So boxe française, the style of Charlemont, that lineage, was very much prevalent. One major factor within the history of Savate, which I keep telling people, be careful with, is because in Savate and in the French martial arts, boxe française and Savate, the histories are mashed together. Professor did this and did this also. They kind of sound the same. They were mashed together in the modern books. Okay, why? Because a lot of that was lost. So everybody gives credit for a very long time just to Charles Charlemont, like if he was the one that developed it, but there were other people that were around that practiced and had clubs. Not knocking him down, because he is a legend and he is one of our forefathers of the French martial arts. Now, in the late 18th century, from 1860, there was a lot of fights. Boxe française against Turkish wrestling, against lutte midi, lutte against lutte turk, against boxing against Savate against boxe française. So it was a lot of this turmoil going round and round in different circles to see which was the better of the elements, In 1899, the famous fight between Charles Charlemont and Joseph Driscoll became. Joseph Driscoll was a boxing champion from England, and of course Charles Charlemont was boxe française champion. Okay, and they met, they fought. Okay, and when they fought, there were long rounds, as you can see in the picture. This picture was given to me by Count Baruzzi. Count Baruzzi gave me this picture. It was very, very small. It was like, maybe 3 inches by. It was a little square, 3 inches by 3 inches, small picture. And I've had it blown up, and we have one in the salle. And yeah, as you can see here, Charles Charlemont is with his back to us, so you can tell just by his back the size of individual was, the strength of this individual. He ends up winning the bout. They went for in the 20 rounds. He ends up winning. So Box Francais becomes the champion of boxing. Were there other bouts like this? Oh, for sure. Well, guess what? They said this is something that Camperucci tells me, is that during the fight, there was a society of box, the Paris Society of Box, the Boxing Society, and there was another society of pugilism. They kind of merged together and said, well, you're really not the champion of Box Francais. So they had another fight, and that was in the 1900 exactly, and that was Maitre, Charles Charlemont with Maitre Michel Castel. And Castel was a student of Joseph Charlemont as well, who had a great school, who had a great pedagogy, also had great students, also was very formidable, and they fought. Okay. Now, I've gotten 3 different versions of the fight. One I got from my professor, Roger Lafont, whose father was there and witnessed it. One I got from Count Baruzzi, whose teacher was Charles Charlemont. And the other one I got from Salvani, who had heard it from the older generations that saw and heard as well. Remember, Salvani was an old professor. When I met Salvani, he was in his 80s. So he had heard there was still a crew of people that were students of Charlemont and Haquin and some of the older guys. Well, Castel got a good friend of his whose name was Haquin, who was a Savate player. Haquin was a ruffian. Haquin was Roger Lafont's grandfather's student. His father's kind of, brother in the same school. They came out of the same school, right? So he ended up being the second for Castel. During the fight, Charlemont was losing, so it is said that Charlemont kicked him in the testicles with a kick, with a fuerte that was aimed towards the testicles. And Castel falls down. And of course, the refs and everybody were on the side of Charlemont. Well, Charlemont wins. Haquin challenged that fight. Eventually, Haquin challenges Charlemont for a fight, which never comes. And this goes on for many years. So there was a tear in the fraternal relationship between Savate and Box Francais. And in fact, the names changed. A person that did Savate was a Savatier, and the person that did Box Francais was a Savateur. And now everybody's Savateur, and when you say Savatier, they say, oh, that didn't exist. It existed in a time frame. Okay? And it was very much told to me that way by many people. But anyway, to each their own. Now, as this continues, Charlemont, stood up. Charlemont won, and Charlemont kept going and started producing a lot of great individuals. Professor Paul Brochure, which Camperucci says was the last coach and trainer for the Olympic team of the 30s in Germany, Berlin, Germany. He was the one that taught him. Was also a protege of Charles Charlemont. There was many others that were around, as you can see, the different pictures and the energy that was around at that time frame. It is said that when he used to do Khan, that he used to strike 100 strikes per minute. And this Camperucci told me. So I remember I used to go out there with a lateral and just strike, try to see if I can get, and get about 150, 165 was the highest I could get. So it is some workout before you start numbing your shoulders and numbing your way. And I used to tell myself, and I used to tell my professor, Jean-Paul Viviani, who taught me Khan, was how can they do it? And he would always say it's because it's the relaxation and that of the pivot. But other than all, Charles Charlemont was and is a figure in the French martial arts in Savate and in both books françaises that is very much prevalent. People respect him for teaching during the latter part of the 18th century and the early part of the 19th century. You know, he ended up passing away in the 1920s, and his lineage is still, his pedagogies were still, you can still see him, certain kicks and certain motions, because that book Frances lineage did not stop. You know, it went to Camporuzzi, went to Bernard Placet, who had plenty of students. It went to Placet's father, who had students. Went to many others. Colgis, which was his Camporuzzi's student. There were others that Mark Kunstil, Mark Kunstil instilled Bob Alex, and it goes on and on and on and on. So that formation or that book Frances is still very much alive. And today, some of the schools, of course, with the new pedagogy going on, everything else kind of changes. But some of the individuals that train with somebody from that lineage, they're still out there. Folks, please press share, press like, ask me some more questions. My email is buitronacademy2012@gmail.com. If you want to learn a little bit more about Savate and learn more of the teaching and learning and so on and so forth, go to buy me a coffee at Buitron Academy at buymeacoffee.com and take it from there. We're going to start, now that COVID is dissipating a little bit, we're going to start doing a little bit more workshops to bring people in, and in the other areas here in the United States, and of course Brazil and Mexico. Until next time, much peace. You all take care of yourself, and also train. Till next time.